Hello, dear listener. Chances are you are someone I have never met, but I am going to go ahead and guess that you love dogs, and maybe you grew up dreaming of being a veterinarian or swimming with dolphins, riding horses, or maybe we're just fascinated by watching ants make their holes. I'm just figuring that you are someone who has long been fascinated by animals and all the interesting things they do. So just with this bit of information about you, I am going to go out on a limb and tell you what I think you should do with your life. I think you should become a dog trainer. When I started down the path to become a professional dog trainer, I had no idea what a fascinating and exciting world I was entering into. And I certainly had no idea that it could be such an interesting career. I did imagine a kind of perfect workday that involved hanging out with dogs and watching dogs and learning about dogs and talking to people about their dogs. And that perfect workday really did become my reality. If you can imagine this kind of life for yourself, and you're either thinking about a new career, or maybe you're just ready to explore taking a hobby to the next level, you should go ahead and apply to the School for the Dogs professional course. This is a 6-month fully virtual program with a curriculum that really delves into the science of animal behavior while guiding you through the kind of practical exercises we've found trainers need in order to hone their skills working with both dogs and people. For our next cohort, starting at the end of August, we are only taking on 4 students. It's a very small program where we offer a lot of personalized attention and mentorship. If you'd like to learn more, visit schoolforthedogs.com/professionalcourse22.
The dogs, for the dogs, school for the dogs, for the dogs.
Elise Mac Adam is here with me today. I am excited to talk to you because I think you're the only person. You're probably the person I've known longest who's been on this podcast. No, I guess I talked to my friend Daisy, who I've known since I was 14. But second to maybe Daisy, in 200 plus episodes, you are someone who knew me from my previous life.
I knew you from many previous lives, probably.
And who I have now known as a friend, as a client, and as an apprentice.
Yeah. Yep. You go way back.
and you've known me as, well, you want to tell the story of how we first met?
So I met you when I was ghostwriting a book about wedding resources in New York City. Mm-hmm. And you were writing engagement column.
Yeah, I was at the New York Observer in, must have been 2002.
Yeah, probably.
And I was the assistant to the editor, and I wrote a weekly column where I interviewed 3 different couples who were getting married, and it was called The Love Beat, Countdown to Bliss. And it was a bit of a scramble sometimes to find couples, because this was long before social media. I had all these, hacks of finding couples. I remember seeing a woman with a big diamond ring on the subway and writing her a note and slipping her a note once, or going to places where people register and going up to people. And
oh, that's so awesome. I didn't know you did that. That's
oh my
great.
God. Yeah. I was I had all these tactics to try and, I would also just email everyone I knew periodically. But yeah, I think you called looking for how do you get your, I guess you were how do you get your announcement in the paper? I'm writing this guide. Yeah. And you and I got to talking, and you were like, oh, well, I'm getting married. And I was like, stop everything. I have to have her in the column. Not knowing anything about you, but I was sure that you would be interested.
Right. No, it was funny because I talked to you first for the book, and then we talked more after that. And yeah.
Yeah. And you are one of like 4 or 5, mostly women that I'm still friends with, whose weddings I
that's awesome.
wrote about, who now have teenage kids. And actually, all of them that I can think of are still married. So you're funny. You're a little like, you don't know each other, but you are like a little club in my mind.
That's great.
Of people. If you are one of these people, you know who you are. I remember early on when we were first starting School for the Dogs, I must have emailed you in some email blast, and you wrote back and you were like, oh my God, I've always wanted to be an animal trainer. This is so cool.
Yeah.
Something like that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Was it in an email that I sent that you first heard that I was doing this, or did I tell you in person? I remember.
I can't remember how. And at the time, so I had Sherry.
Right,
and
right.
He was like a few years old.
Sherry was a Cairn Terrier.
He was a Cairn Terrier. He was
Sheridan.
We called him Sherry.
And how did Sheridan come into your life?
So my parents had a rescue Cairn Terrier. So in New York, our dog in New York was a rescued Cairn Terrier named Muffin. We didn't.
And this is you growing up in Manhattan?
Yeah, when we moved to New York, I was in the middle of high school.
Where'd you go to high school again?
I went to the last 3 years of high school at Trinity.
In Manhattan.
In
I
Manhattan.
forgot that's also something we have in common, is we're Manhattan kids.
And so she was around, Muffin was around for a really long time. And I love Cairn Terriers. Mm-hmm. And right after I moved in with Steve, I was like, before anything, I was recovering from the death of Muffin, and I wanted to, and so we just kind of looked around and we found this breeder. She was reputable and also an enormous Star Trek fan. Like, her house was full of these, like, what do you call it? The black velvet portraits of Star Trek characters. Anyway, and then, so we got Sherry from her, and this was right before September 11th. We got him in the summer, mm-hmm. and literally the first day that he was allowed to go out after getting his shots was September 11th. Mm-hmm. So,
wow. So you had Sherry, and then 10 or so years later, you got an email from me being like, "Hey, I'm a dog trainer now."
Yeah. So and I remember we just had him like jumped. We brought him in to work with you actually, even though he was, no spring chicken. And
do you remember writing me that, being like, "Oh my God, I wanted to be an animal trainer"?
Yes,
yeah,
I do because I actually.
But did it seem random to hear from me and being like, "Oh, you're a dog trainer now"?
It did and it didn't, because I think you and I had a lot of dog conversations,
right.
When, because I think you and I may share this. Like, I sort of tell a lot of the stories of my life through the dogs that I have known, like from from the time I was like really little, like, even like dogs that weren't my dogs that were like.
You remember the world through dogs.
I remember the world through the dogs that I know.
I guess I ask about myself and like what it was like to hear that for me, because I feel like there were some people for whom it seemed like a really random thing when I was like, I'm going to become a dog trainer. I remember someone was like, so that you can write about the experience of becoming a dog trainer for a magazine? And I was like, no. So that I can train dogs. And other people were like, oh yeah, that makes sense as something that Annie should be doing for a living. But then now on the other side, I feel like there are people, well, I mean, I think a lot of people I know have no idea that I ever did anything else other than dog training professionally. So.
Right. No, I remember thinking that, first of all, it made total sense, and it just sounded like this amazing idea.
I remember thinking about making like this career transition in a way that felt like no one's going to take me seriously ever about anything again. I guess that's just, we all have our like insecurities about anything.
I think we all do that, but the funny thing is, and I can say this for you, I cannot say this for me, but I can say it for you because I believe this for you, that it's the kind of thing that actually gives you more credibility, because to engage in such a big transition means you have to take it seriously, and you have to really believe in what you're doing, and you have to, it is a big course of study, like what you. Yeah,
although there are certainly people who take no course of study.
Yeah, there's that, yes.
And do quite well for themselves. So I remember Sherry. I don't remember doing training with Sherry, but then I remember you got, I don't know how much you want to talk about the Linus
Yeah,
and
well, we can talk about it. I mean,
Preston.
Yeah, so we got Linus.
Which is actually an interesting, I mean, if you feel like sharing about it, which you don't have to.
Sure, well, I can because in some ways it led me to, the apprenticeship. Yeah. So I'll tell the short version without crying.
I'll elaborate without crying. Oh, I know it's hard.
So we got Linus,
who was a Cairn Terrier.
He was also
puppy.
A Cairn Terrier as Sherry was getting older.
And you came to puppy kindergarten at School for the Dogs.
That's right.
Then located in my living room. OG.
Which was awesome. And this was sort of the moment where when he was a puppy, this wasn't really an issue. But as he got older...
Here, move a little bit closer.
As he got older, Linus started developing a lot of anxiety that in the end I sort of really realized was related to being in the city. And then Sherry died really suddenly. He just was kind of weird one day, and I took him to the vet, and the vet happened to have a sonogram person in the vet that day, and they did a sonogram, and there was a gigantic cancerous tumor on his heart, and and he just couldn't make it. And right after that, Linus became super, super anxious, and I could barely get him to like he was barking all the time, but he didn't want to walk very much, and he would only do certain things. And
how old was he by that point?
He was, I think, probably about 18 months old, maybe a little.
I don't remember the specifics because it was like 10 years ago now, but I remember he was a difficult puppy in puppy kindergarten.
He was, yeah.
I don't remember what was difficult.
Yeah.
I don't have that memory of very many puppies.
He was kind of like, I think he was like almost like a little ADHD in his like he could learn things really quickly, but he, would kind of like sail off into another, arena. And if I look back, I think probably the city was always an issue, but it became really pronounced after Sherry died. And time went past, and there was an opportunity. Someone said, we have this puppy, a Chesky Terrier. And once again...
I remember when you were like, I think we should get another dog. I was like, great, good idea. Just maybe don't get another terrier. Oh. And then you're like, I'm getting a Chesky Terrier. It's like, great.
I know. But the funny thing is that, so Preston, the Chesky Terrier that we have, was kind of the opposite in personality.
Oh, God, yeah.
Super...
mellow's the wrong word. Preston is a very unusual dog, personality-wise.
He's very unusual personality.
How would you describe him?
He's very nervous, but very he's nervous around new people and new things. But once he is used to you, he is just like a shmoo. Like he's just this kind of marshmallow that kind of like settles in. He's like an old man, kind of, sort of.
And does he go outside yet, or still no?
He goes, I usually take him out we have a little balcony, with grass on it now. I put like grass, but he's like, he gets very nervous outside, but if you were to see, you haven't seen him in a really long time.
He doesn't go for walks outside still, right?
No. Although he now does a lot of things that he didn't used to do, like he loves to like run out into the apartment hallway. He runs onto the elevator.
But it's intense anxiety. Yeah.
He has intense anxiety, but he's made enormous strides in terms of his ability to be around new people and things like that. And
he's such a sweetie.
He's also a real sweetie.
So back in time. Back in time.
So the long story is that in the end, after a ton of work, we just ended up rehoming.
After a ton of work to do what? Because I think you didn't really describe that.
Right. So Linus suddenly, it felt very sudden. The dogs were fine together for kind of a long time. And then right when Preston turned 1, Linus kind of really changed his mind, like very suddenly, and became very antagonistic towards Preston. And through multiple efforts with School for the Dogs, we had trainers and medication and all sorts of things. We did a lot of different sessions and a lot of different work, And
To try and get them to coexist.
exactly, sorry, yes, to
Yeah.
try to get them to coexist, and also to try to get both of them to be happy together.
And to be clear, they were like, he was attacking Preston.
he was attacking Preston.
And what were some of the triggers?
It could be, sometimes it was sort of out of nowhere. It felt like if you just sort of saw him. Sometimes it would be, sort of standard things like if they got cornered in an area together, or if like the doorbell rang and they both ran up to the front door. I think in retrospect, it might have been like you could see elements of resource guarding, but it was never clear in terms of, oh, he has my food or he has my toy and I want that from him. It was not an obvious kind of resource guarding that, you could.
So what were some of the solutions that didn't work?
Well,
or that were attempted, I should say.
The medication, we tried medicating both of them with different medications.
And you worked with Dr. Christensen, Dr. Tu,
Both of them.
with behavior vets.
Yeah, they're awesome. And I also worked with our vet to kind of coordinate with all of that.
Who's your vet?
Well, at the time, we were seeing Dr. Mary Xanthos, but she is subsequently retired. So, but that was the vet at the time. So we tried that, and we did a lot of sort of just positive conditioning them to each other. We trained them separately. So I would work with, we would work with Linus one week and then Preston another week. We would have sort of special walk times for Linus, and I had the kids, my two children, who were also School for the Dogs volunteers for a while. They were kid decoys for, dogs who are nervous around kids. And this was over the course of years. We really worked. Well, when I say we, I think I probably just mean me. I worked really hard to try to get things to work together for them. And, our neighbors who always hated us because if it wasn't the dogs, it was the children.
Yeah, while we're talking, I'm just going to look up to try and give an exact number of the sessions that we did.
Oh, okay.
to give numbers to this. Yeah.
So it lasted for a really long time, and then finally, I didn't want to really accept defeat, because obviously I
think it's an important thing to talk about this, because I think
yes, it happened.
It happened.
It was also like I loved and continue to love Linus deeply. So I admit it, my refusal to accept failure, but I think it just became an issue where clearly there was unhappiness, and and my pride, or whatever you want to call it, really should not have taken precedence over Linus, in particular's happiness and his particular kind of anxiety, which definitely you could feel. I could feel it in the city. Once he got to a new home, and his owner occasionally writes to me and sends me pictures and stuff, once in a, just very rare, occasionally, he's much happier. And he's a happy guy now. And
so you did the hard thing, but you did, I think, the right thing.
Yeah.
Did you start out thinking like, this is a solvable problem if I just put in the effort and the time?
Yeah. This is a solvable problem if I love enough, exert myself enough, take this problem, super, super seriously, which I definitely did. I wasn't like, cavalier, but I just think ultimately it's an important thing that I would want to impart to people, that it's not always about effort,
Do you feel like you have been a client with us for 3,037 days, according to this? What was it like for your family to make that, to do that?
I think the truth of the matter is, I think it was the worst for me. I think that at the time the children were developing lives outside of the home, and the idea of Linus being in a different house that made him happier was really comfortable for them. However, now the children have become completely obsessed with Preston now, and they're older. They're significantly older now. So it's interesting how this bond goes in these funny cycles.
So it made them Well, maybe it just opened them up to be able to bond with Preston in a way rather than having to navigate between the two of them.
Although I would say that the closest Preston has really solidified in this fascinating way in the last year, which might be pandemic based, or it might be just the age that they're at right now, where they feel maybe they feel more
teenagers.
They're teenagers. They may feel more comfortable like expressing physical love toward the dog than to their parents right now, which is also very possible. But it was hardest for me. It continues to be hard for me.
Tell me what the upside was. I mean, I'm guessing the upside is you decided maybe you wanted to learn more about dog training.
Yeah. I decided that this experience for me was something that might make me a good trainer, because in terms of, first of all, I love working with dogs and I love that work, but also I think there are times when people I know have worked with trainers and the kind of message that they get from them is
it's your fault.
It's your fault.
Why is that so sticky? I'm putting together this episode this week, which by the time this airs, I guess I will have posted, but it's Cesar Milan talking to Jada Pinkett Smith and about their longtime friendship with her mother. And so much of it seems like it always comes around to it's all about the human. It's all about the human seems sort of like the refrain, they're learning it from you. And I don't know why that's such a sticky idea.
I think it comes from
are we just so egocentric that we think it's all about us all the time?
Well, it is that kind of the American thing of you almost libertarian, you're responsible for everything. You're in charge of everything. You can control everything. And you have to take responsibility, and
it's like that Ayn Randian take
and
on
own your, and I think it's very popular at this particular moment culturally.
Because I don't think Linus's issues had anything to do with you.
No, I don't think so either. I don't think
I think it was not a reflection of your anxiety.
But that's
by the way.
And thank you. But I do think that that's also a trend you see in parenting a little bit as well.
One thing that I think that was in the Caesar interview was he kept saying, you have to love yourself and you have to believe in yourself and you have to want to, because I was also talking about his how he lived his dream of jumping the border and becoming a dog training. It was all about following his dream. You have to want it and believe it and love yourself. And I was I know a lot of I'm thinking to myself, I know a lot of really wonderful dog trainers who I think struggle probably with a degree of self-love or self-care, who struggle with anxiety and depression and have all the normal human behaviors and problems that we all have, and personality quirks and traits, and they also know how to train dogs really well. And maybe that does help inform some parts of their lives, but the two things seem kind of...
I think self-consciousness is okay in almost every profession. And I think having had negative experiences is probably a good thing in terms of figuring out sort of how to deal with somebody else having a similar, if not the same, but similar negative experience.
Good way to put it. So your experience of people, I kind of interrupted you because you were saying your experience of was people going to dog trainers and being told it was their fault.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the other thing also is I think this is something I can say. I don't always practice what I preach, but I also think that living from a perspective of regret is not helpful when you're working with dogs. That it's better to sort of posit how to move forward. Okay, this is an issue that the dog has. Whatever happened, whatever previous training happened, it's over.
So, yeah. I feel similarly to that, I often think about how people obsess about the reason why a dog did something, which is kind of that, rooted in the past or rooted in imagining rather than rooted in, moving forward and addressing what's in front of you and the solution.
Yes. I mean, to a certain extent, you're the dog peed over there. Well, there's a lot of possible for it, some of which may be obvious and useful to know, oh, is there a medical problem? Or whatever. But other of those possibilities are not going to help you moving forward. I think that's the case also. I have 2 kids, and in some ways I also think that relates to, my children as well. Like, you can look at endless amounts of reasoning why. And so when my younger child, Sebastian, was in nursery school, he was eventually diagnosed with ADHD. But before that, I just got a lot of complaints from the school. And the complaints were very vague because he was doing stuff that was not like classic ADHD stuff. It was like weird and anxious stuff. And in retrospect, I think the school, again, was doing the thing that we just talked about with dog training, which is like, this is your fault, make him better. And it was completely unhelpful. And I still resent the school for it. And instead of saying, something about this environment is having this effect on him, can we talk about how to work with it? Or just asking what is going on, I think is better than fix it. Mm-hmm. But whether it's because we're in New York, although I actually think that this is probably more of a common cultural thing in the United States right now, people just want to fix it. Mm-hmm. People just want to fix your kid, your dog, your, faucet, whatever, as fast as possible. The idea that there's going to be a process and that actually investing in the process might actually be just as interesting and rewarding as the quick fix is something that I think we would really benefit from understanding.
Yeah. So when you first started training with us, then was it surprising to you? Was it what you thought dog training would be, what animal training would be?
Yeah, I mean, it was basically what I felt training would be like. I had done some puppy class with Sherry, obviously many, many years before. And a lot of the practices were different. Like, I remember one of the things that that happened was the shake the can to get them of pennies. So, but a lot of the stuff that we worked on really made sense to me in terms of,
in the Sherry's class?
In the School for the Dogs classes.
So it made sense to you, and do you remember sort of realizing that there were like different kinds of dog training out there then? Did that ever gel for you?
Not until much later, actually. Like, I was just sort of thinking, this is the way. Because I didn't really shop around for like a training philosophy. I didn't sort of pursue, like, I knew what I responded to well, and I know what kind of turned me off. But I remember actually this came up as a bit of conversation in the apprenticeship program, because there are a lot more named styles of training now than when I first got into any kind of dog training. Mm-hmm. And I got very, what is it? Is it control?
Control unleashed, or no?
There's control, and then there's one that's
balanced.
Like balanced.
Oh, balance. Okay.
Yeah.
Balanced training. Okay.
And that and so it's funny because
like that wasn't a term that you'd heard before?
I had not heard that term before, and then when I saw it, I was like really turned off by it.
How would you describe what balance training is to someone listening who has no idea what that is? You're like making a face.
Yeah, that to me did not strike me as balanced. That to me struck me as, and the word that came to mind more is like bossy. Like, it didn't strike me as balancing at all. It struck me as much more like, being very controlling. In what I
think balance trainers sort of define it as using a mix of positive reinforcement and punishment as called for in order to achieve the best, fastest, and most humane, in their opinion, result that you can achieve that's within what's right for the dog. And I mean, it's complicated because no one is a purely positive reinforcement dog trainer. Like, you can't go through life, training any animal without sometimes even accidentally. Right.
But at the same time, I feel like the thing about the balance training, it seems like the kind of a well-intentioned philosophy that when put into practice is so hard to enact, like turns into, it skews more towards the punishment than to the positive, which is, and so all the videos that we kind of discussed in the apprenticeship group were always like, well, this is a balance training situation, and it was always like the dog was always looking kind of miserable and really confused, and it never seemed to produce like the kind of sort of happy result that, you know, even in demo videos, it just felt very forced and not entirely successful, and also not something that I felt like would be easily replicated by.
Well, especially like with dogs like yours, like you have had a lot of experience with these very anxious,
different kinds of anxiety.
Different types of anxiety. That like those are not dogs who I think would have responded well to.
That may have been why I was always like, even when we were discussing these videos, I was like, this just doesn't. Also, interestingly, a lot of the dogs in the apprenticeship program, people also had different kinds of anxiety as well. So like all of us together were like, my dog would never have been able to handle that. And like, you know, like there were 4 of us, all of our dogs had different anxieties.
So you expressed interest to me about doing the professional course after having done, I think I finally have it here. Oh, here, okay, I got it. It's still loading very slowly. Right, behavior day trainings. That you want to take some guesses here?
No, I don't. You just lay it on me.
Puppy basic manners follow-up sessions. You did about 15 of those. 2014, 2015, 2016, 2017. Day training. You did 72 day training sessions. You did puppy kindergarten. You did behavior therapy follow-up sessions. 65 of those.
We did a lot. We worked really hard.
And that doesn't include the overnights.
Yep.
And dog buddying, which is what we used to do, a service that we don't offer anywhere. Is basically, we'll hang out with your dog. That's a lot of training.
It's a lot of training.
Yeah. So after working with us for all that time, at some point you expressed interest in doing the professional course. And I said, do it. And you were like, I don't know.
Well, what's funny
and I was
is
like,
that,
do it.
What's funny, when you said you should do it, I was like, oh. I realized as I really thought a lot about it, because it was the application process is non-trivial, like, you know. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I finally had to do this thing where I got very anxious about it, of course. And I finally had to do this thing where I was like, okay, it's due by this time. If I cannot complete everything by an hour before it's due, then it's not meant to be. Mm-hmm. So I really like.
And you did it.
Yes.
And no regrets.
And no regrets. No, it was really good. It was a really good experience to set
that intention.
And do it.
Yeah.
And it also meant a lot to do it.
So, yeah. So, I mean, before sort of talking, I guess, about the process, like, how do you see yourself now compared to how you see yourself going in? Versus now.
It was a big transformation, in part because, you know, I came into the apprenticeship group with a lot of different experience. I was like older, my dog was older. I was the only person with children, so that gave me a really different perspective on, I feel like, everything. I remember a lot of the sort of times we were talking about how to talk to clients about things, and I remember saying a few times, like, well, this is something that I sort of experienced on a playground once, and it's very similar to this, and and so I felt like, in a way, a lot of other life experience really connected well with the sort of School for the Dogs training philosophy, that it actually, it pairs really well. And something that you kind of talk about a lot is like training dogs and training humans, has a lot, there's a lot of parallels in terms of how you work with especially small children. And I would say that this is something that had a lot of ebbs and flows for me over the course of the course, which was learning how to really take myself seriously. Like, there would occasionally be these kind of setbacks where I would, really, doubt myself and feel like this is not something I can do. This is not, I'm a real disappointment, and my, instructor thinks I'm really, bad at this and I shouldn't continue. and then I'd just be like, okay, I've got to like regroup and buckle down and redouble my efforts here. And I found that we do have a few recordings of sessions that I think I used a few of them in the end, and they're really good. As a student, they're really good to work with because you can rewind and watch things again and see how the dog and the owner react to things, and that's really helpful because there are times when you're like live in a session, you're watching, you're writing things down, and you might miss something, or like you're watching the trainer and then you might want to go back and watch what the dog does, or the other way around. And one of the things that I really learned is that Preston, my nervous dog, who I was told not to say this, but he's actually not that bright. He's a little dumb. But he works really so much better with an object. It is really interesting, the difference between asking him to do something without an object and then teaching him to do something with an object, because it is night and day. Like,
it's so interesting.
It's so interesting. That was like a really exciting and fascinating thing to learn. And he also found it exciting and fascinating. And he learned how to do these crazy things, and he would get really...
yeah, but if you try and use like a hand target, he's like...
Yeah, he gets this like kind of like, oh, okay, like hand target's okay. But if you tell him to do things like, even sit, he's a little like, really? Okay. Like it takes him a while. Whereas if you tell, now like rolling a ball, like it's like absolutely no problem.
Wow.
Walk through a hoop, get up on that thing. Yep, totally. All those things. Yeah. So he learned a lot of that. But then the other things were like, okay. And even like I tried to train my children to train him, and they cannot figure out how to get him to do a hand touch. Like they cannot do it at all. Like, and I loved the class shadowing. Like I loved the puppy. I did puppy kindergarten, and I shadowed a lot of day school and puppy day school, just because it really helped me practice on dogs who weren't Preston.
Well, where do you see yourself as far as animal training goes going forward? What would you where do you see yourself in 5 years when both your boys are
in college
in their 20s?
So I think I told you back when I started this that one thing I really loved the classes. I love watching people like learn in a classroom setting, and I would like be really into TAing first of all, and then learning how to eventually move on to sort of teaching classes and working with people. And I do not know, like when we had these long discussions, especially after a couple of the guest lectures, several of the people that I was in class with were really interested in working with dogs with like real behavior problems. I don't 100% know if I would feel comfortable certainly at this point, like with that responsibility, in part because I know what it's like to have had the experience of dogs with real behavior problems and want solutions so badly, and knowing that you can't always find them. But at the moment, I think where I'm sort of most keyed in is the idea of teaching in classes, and just sort of watching people in those like kind of like intense learning environment kind of thing.
That's so interesting. Yeah, I mean, there's so many people who want to work with dogs who have like severe behavior issues, but I actually liked teaching classes. I mean, I'm not teaching classes right now, but I liked being on my feet and kind of juggling the room, which a lot of people are like, this makes me crazy. How do you have 6 dogs and 12 people? And the room's only 400 square feet. And but I somehow never felt that overwhelmed. I somehow was able to just like be in the moment about it. Well, I'm excited that you did the program.
I'm excited
proud of you for going through it and doing so amazingly well with not the easiest dog and with 2 kids, which makes everything harder, I think.
Yes. Well, now you know. So.
Yeah. I used to think people just use kids as an excuse for not getting things done, and now I know.
I know. They take up a lot of your, like,
Time and mental
headspace.
energy.
It's like your headspace, really, you know.
My physical space.
And your physical space. No.
And they're so great.
Big thanks to Elise. If you are interested in our professional course, you can go ahead and apply through the end of June at schoolforthedogs.com/professional course 22. I will be interviewing 2 other recent graduates in the next few weeks, but also we are offering new client-free consults again, which you can book if you go to schoolforthedogs.com, you'll see a pop-up, and you could book one of those consults with Leah or Sarah, either one of whom would be happy to talk about their experience. Thanks as always for listening. You can visit us on Instagram at schoolforthedogs, and you can support us by shopping at storeforthedogs.com.